So I'm really pleased. I'm joined by Webb this morning. Caroline, thank you for giving up your time to do this.
No problem at all. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Susie. And we've known each other a while now, so I feel that
We have. I don't know if I actually want to admit how long we've known each other.
definitely
Live
not,
recording.
definitely
I think we'll skip past that bit. But we've placed you. I was wondering if it was twice or three times. Definitely twice.
definitely twice,
Yeah.
nearly three, I want to say. But
Yeah,
I
I think we
say
maybe
that.
came close on a third as well. But yeah, we have known each other a very, very long time. But for the benefit of people who maybe don't know you yet, so a super experienced chief marketing officer. I would say that you've done a load for brands where there's been commercial growth, transformation, and your sectors are really broad. So you've done retail, leisure travel, you've done direct to consumer and B2B. And most recently, obviously, you were with Royal Mint. So that was incredible, on that executive leadership team and how you drove the transformation for growth with that business. And then some other brands that you've worked with, TM Lewin, BAA, which is World Duty Free for those who aren't familiar, Travel Lodge, Weight Watchers, or WW as I think they're rebranded now. So what I would say that I've kind of come to learn over the years as well is your superpower is definitely, you'd say, we were chatting before we started recording, creativity and curiosity and your ability to problem solve. So it has by no means been easy on some of these roles that you've gone in to do, but you've figured out what that sort of gnarly commercial issue is, and then you've taken the team through that growth and transformation piece. So I'm really chuffed that we get to do this. And how about we dive straight in? Would you, for those listening, give a recap on your career journey to date, how you got to this level as CMO, and any highlights along the way?
So I'm not going to list off all the brands that I've worked with, but Susie's done a great job of doing that. I guess what I'm going to just kind of cover off is why I've built some of the skills that I've built through my career and where I learned them and how that came to being. So when I started out in marketing, it was a long time ago. It was very simple. And actually, one of my first jobs was working in cinemas. And the pressure on a Monday afternoon to get the listings to time out of the film shows for this week was extraordinary. And actually, I can still remember sitting there, and we had fax machines sending in the timings, and we had to process them and get them off to time out. It was the most incredible pressure. And if you didn't have them, nobody knew when they were going to the cinema. So the impact of my role was massive if I got it wrong, because can you imagine all the local papers with no cinema times? Can't even imagine local papers anymore. So, but what that did really get me into this urgency, this pressure, this kind of responsibility that comes with a marketing role. And I think that's kind of born with me as I've gone through my career. And then I kind of, after I worked in cinemas, I ended up at Weight Watchers, which has already been mentioned right there. It's all about data, but it was coupon collecting. So I was counting coupons. And again, really basic stuff, but actually really powerful in the terms of brand and how people were buying into that brand and the experience, because it gave them an experience that they couldn't get anywhere else. I then went to Debenhams, and Debenhams was a real formation of my career. I was there for 7.5 years. I grew as a manager, I grew as a person, I grew all my skills really from Debenhams. I worked in local marketing, promotions, cosmetic marketing, menswear, kidswear, sale marketing. And I guess in a way, one of my standout moments was when my dad goes, "Oh, is that your TV ad on the TV?" It's what other people see about your jobs. And I think I've always worked for brands, and I've been lucky to work for brands that people have something to say about or can see. And that's given me a lot of satisfaction in my career, but it's also given me sort of proud moments and things that I can be noticed for. Then I went to Travel Lodge. I had a few other things. I worked for a government organisation about money and money advice, but I went to Travel Lodge, and that's really where I honed my strategic skills and kind of realised the importance of getting the strategy right. I inherited a brand when I went there that the strategy was promoting the sector, not the brand. And in a market where they were playing second fiddle to Premier Inn, and still do, actually that wasn't the right positioning for them. So within 9 months, I'd repitched the creative business, I'd worked with a media agency, I'd done a whole new load of research to understand what it was that motivated the customers, and actually was behind the puppets, and the output was the puppets. So it's an incredible team effort, but I was kind of the critical person that drove that through, and that gave me a lot of satisfaction as a marketeer, but also how important branding is and getting it. And that's Travelogical will stick with me forever, and those puppets will stick with me forever. I don't even think the videos are available anymore, so I don't think anyone can look in the archive, but really powerful stuff. And it definitely had a result. We grew direct sales, and I noticed yesterday, when I was there were just under 500 hotels. There's now 600 hotels. They've just opened their 600 hotels. So that brand is going from strength to strength based on some of those core principles that we had then. And then I went to BAA, and through knowing Suzie was fascinating. I joined there, and 10 days after I joined, the liquid bans came into force. So when I was going to promote airport shopping and beautiful things that you can buy from World Duty Free, that all happened to be liquids pastes. There was a big problem because suddenly we couldn't sell anything. And so my team and a core team were put together to really talk to customers about what they now had to do going through security. So that 100 mil rule, I became very aware of how we communicated it and how did we make it simple. And then we very gradually navigated the shopping brand of BAA Retail, which is really important commercially for the airports. Without shopping, the fees for airports, the charges you'll pay for your flights will be higher. Shopping is what keeps these airports moving and keeps them growing and improving. And that we then had to move into telling people, actually, you now can shop again, and we want you to, and you can fly with everything you buy. So yeah, again, some really passionate stuff that I did there, and really enjoyed it, and identified a really cool strategy about being the best part of your journey. Actually sitting in the airport lounge is probably time you never had, things you never do with a family. Having breakfast together is quite enjoyable if you're on a family holiday. So really focused on these key moments we were giving travellers. And I'm going to then fast forward probably to my most recent role, which I guess in one respect has been just 4 years of complete joy and privilege in terms of working on one of the world's oldest brands, learning with that how responsible you have to be for a brand that has heritage, what a responsibility personally it is as well when you're making decisions on a tactical thing, whether it's the right thing. But the time there, I had stepped into a CMO role. I was only the second CMO ever at the moment, and that came with it at a critical time for the business. And we had some big comms challenges. We've had changes of businesses. We've had 2 new businesses were launched during that period. We closed down our overseas currency division. That was all about how do we navigate this narrative that this brand has and make it relevant for the future. And so exciting that they're leading the way on sustainability as well. So my role was able to touch on all of those, from jewelry and luxury and high value collectibles for high net worths, all the way through to how do you get young collectors into collecting and a museum, and how do you update that narrative, but also equip a brand with a strategy that's got longevity, and working with my executive colleagues to really push where we wanted to go, and knowing that the market for coinage is just different from where it's always been, and that's what the Mint has always done. So hugely amazing, and so many standout moments. It's hard to put them down. But I guess for me, I was lucky enough to appear on CNN the night before the coronation and talk about coronation coins. And then my friends used to laugh at me because I said, I'm going for a meeting in Buckingham Palace. And it was like, it was a bit surreal, and the moments and the conversations that I was having, it was surreal. But I look back on it with a huge amount of pride and privilege of being able to work with a team at exec level and a marketing team that were hugely creative, wanted to go on a journey and push the company forward, and really transform for the next 2,000 years.
What an amazing opportunity. It's funny, you know, as I'm listening as you go back through, because I've been with you for most of the journey along the way. So, you know, congratulations, you know, that your most recent role. What an incredible role and privilege to have had that role. I know within all the roles, there's been a big area of strategy, and that's one of your key strengths in terms of identifying, you know, what's that commercial marketing strategy that needs to be delivered, how are we going to kind of drive growth. How have you navigated that, Caroline? Because, you know, the last few years we've seen huge change and transformation to, like, what's your process? How do you navigate it?
I think the first thing to really focus on is, when we talk about strategy, it's what kind of strategy are you trying to fulfill. So I was lucky enough, and I've been lucky enough to work with businesses that were in a state of transformation, so needed new strategies. If you inherit a brand that doesn't need a new strategy, don't reinvent it for the marketing's sake. You can't get bored of your strategy. Your strategy is your end goal, your North Star. And I think you can, where I've gone into roles, it's really important you look at that strategy and go, does this work for today's audience? We all know the audience is moving faster than they've ever moved. The business world is moving faster than it. But a strategy is a framework. It can't be something you change every 3 months just because something else has changed. I think gone are the days. I mean, even if I look back 5 years, just before I joined the Royal Mint, the world wasn't changing as fast as it is now. There weren't so many external factors that you were having to take into account. And I think marketing has to move with that. And my advice on strategy is, know your North Star, set it for 5 to 7 years out, think about what that future brand looks like, and then make sure you are constantly listening to what your customers are saying, what your customer-facing teams are saying, and don't get overwhelmed by the data that's now available. We've got so much data and so much I called it insight. I was talking about this the other day with somebody else, but data is our friend, but it can also be our biggest enemy. You can get lost in it. What you've got to start doing is hypothesizing in your strategy of what are the data and what are the insights that are going to affect your future, and how do you then react and mitigate against those. And I think keep trying. When you've got things within your strategy that aren't working, there will be another way in to get to your end goal, but you just have to find another route. You can't be so focused on one thing that you lose sight of that end goal. I guess when I look at brands that are doing it, most of them are overcomplicating strategy. Yeah. It should probably be 3 things that you're aiming to do, and they should be all about how you improve things for your customers from a marketing perspective. And I think as a leader, one of the most important things is to really think about not just what's done before. We all inherit brands and everyone goes, that's what's worked before, that's what worked before. That's not going to work going forward. Nothing's working the same as it has. So your strategy gives you a framework, is based in customer insight, and absolutely needs to be your guiding star. That's at the point for all your conversations that you're having. And make sure you're listening. Listening to customers is going to be more important. I've been talking a lot recently about how customers are driving our narratives as brands. What you've got to work out as in your strategy is how you drive the narrative. I was incredibly lucky at the Royal Mint. The media were interested in us. The public were interested in us. With that, you've got a brand that could get PR every week about something it was doing. That isn't true of a lot of the brands out there. And it's hard. to find a way to get into customers' minds when they've got so many triggers and things going on in their lives and conversations going on. And you've got to work out the way that works for you. And don't try to be somebody else. Be yourself, know what your customers want, and stick to that.
Funny, I was listening to you talk through that, and it just reminded me that obviously you've got a degree in economics, and you've got a really, I think, all the CMOs I've met over the years, you've got quite a unique skill set in the sense that you're clearly deeply talented with mathematics, data, and the analytical and insight side. But then you've got this wealth of kind of creativity, curiosity, and it's quite an unusual combination. And I'm not even sure you realise how handy that is, that you've got that real balance. But it definitely, I would say that's your superpower, actually, is that you've got this real balance of those quite different skills.
I think I probably have been told I'm lucky about that. So I know when I first went and tried to get my own job, someone recruited me because I had a maths degree, because they thought, and it was in a comms role. So actually, but he only looked at my maths degree. Apart from that, there was nothing else. He just looked at that. After that, I think more recently I've come to realise that the way I get to data and understanding and hypotheses isn't like everybody else does. I get there quite quickly, and I tend to then come up with a flurry of ideas of what might be happening, or I love getting involved in how do you get the best out of a customer insight panel. How do you really get under the skin, and which different directions and what problem you're solving, because actually that's what we do. We solve problems. We need to get more people in the door. That's footfall. That's what we have to do. That was retail through and through. Just get people into the store, then they'll buy. Get people get people online. It's all the same principles that were always applied. And you do need to see through the noise sometimes. And I just put something actually on LinkedIn about noise and the AI world, that actually insights are crafted by good people who understand what good insight looks like. What's happening with AI and all of the proprietary softwares and different tools that you can use in marketing and the MarTech is there's so much data, it's just creating noise. What you've got to do is cut through that noise and find the answer that works for you, and move on and learn quickly. So try something. If it doesn't work, move on. Be doing all the principles that we've always done in marketing. Do the A/B testing, do the testing, get things live, do MVPs, just get something going and keep things moving. I think marketing going forward is going to be all about momentum and moving.
Yes, I think you're right there. I think that's interesting. And in terms of kind of a nice segue for that is on the leading of the teams, because you're leading large teams through periods of what are now constant change and transformation and growth. How do you do that? What's your approach?
I think the one word that sort of comes out is empathy. The teams that I've led have had so many different characters, so many different personalities. I mean, the team at the Mint was about 80 people, but I covered everybody from an art historian in our museum all the way through to a social media exec and a creative team. And I know, and comms experts, they all have very different needs, very different requirements as people. And I don't know, some of them are experts that I will never be able to have the depth of knowledge that they've got. But what I've always done with teams is be there, be present, show empathy. So actually, when you're giving them a really hard task, say, I understand this isn't going to be easy, but how can we help each other? How do we do this together? Give them a safe psychological space. And that's really important. I had product under me at the Royal Mint, and everyone was going, as soon as someone came up with a product idea, everyone jumped on it. And actually what I was trying to do was give them a buffer zone, because actually they didn't want the first idea that came up to be the one that got through to launch. They wanted the best idea to go through. So filtering and supporting the team. I also think you are their marketing voice at all levels of the organization, particularly when you get to a CMO role, and you've got to be their biggest advocates, and they've got to see that. So yeah, you've got to be visible, you've got to know what you're talking about, you've got to understand, and you've got to be willing to listen. I think sometimes, and particularly in transformation, people don't want to try new things, and they don't necessarily feel that that's how they want to do it. Getting them to do it safely with your support is a way, and you've got to get your managers to come with you on that journey as well. It's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy to get everyone, and they'll all come on different journeys. Everybody's been through a change curve. Everybody understands that you go through different emotions at different stage, but you will get some real advocates, and then they rise to the top, and they can do almighty things when the team is really functioning at full throttle. And all the teams
very true.
have been.
We chatted about growth mindset before we sort of hit record here, because I know it's something that we both believe in, and I think that's got a lot to do with kind of the way people lead teams, etc. What have you learned, or what would you share with people that would help them about positivity mindset, having a growth mindset in particular?
I think it's you never say no. That sounds a very bold statement, but I think you've got to, if you want to grow, you've got to be asking yourselves the big questions and trying and pushing, and even using the word trying. Trying is one of those words. If you try, you might not do it. If you do it, you'll do it. So again, Suzie and I have shared a few words about different things, but this was one area that I really think, if you believe you're there and you're doing what you need to do, it will come. And the power of the brand, and never saying no. I got some really great feedback as I was leaving the Mint, that one of our core stakeholders, who is in politics, I'm not going to go any further than that, but she actually said, the reason I enjoyed working with you, Caroline, is you always said, we can do that. We can work with that feedback. Even if it was really bad feedback, I could always take it and try and go, okay, we're going to navigate it like this. This is how we get through those difficult projects. This is how we do things that have never been done before. Because again, I think CMOs often have to trail a path that's never been done before.
And then my final question for you is, what advice would you pass now to anyone who's set their sights on the CMO role? So there might be a head of, there might be a director, but irrespective, they've set their sights on a CMO role. What advice would you share with them to help them on their way?
I think, again, this is my experience, so I'm going to be very specific to my experience. When I was coming up through my career, heads of were really hard to get hold of as jobs. And actually you needed a lot of experience to get there. I think there's a lot more heads of now, but they tend to be in much more niche areas. I think you've got to really think about moving from a specialist area to a generalist area and becoming a general marketeer. And that might be uncomfortable for you, because you might have to go into data, you might have to go into comms and reputation management, you might have to push yourself. But those are the things that will make you a really good CMO, is if you can move from being specialist to generalist. And that also is something you've got to instill in your teams, and you've got to bring people on and give them opportunities, because I don't believe a CMO who is purely a specialist can do what's required. So that's sort of the skills side. My view has always been, be a bit pragmatic about it and open-minded to what your perfect CMO role is. They're hard roles, and they're hard for a reason. They're executive. So you have greater accountability. You will also spend a lot of your time not necessarily doing marketing. So if you love detailed marketing, that isn't what you're going to be doing as a CMO. And I think that, for me, that difference of level and understanding of where you're going to be spending your time, it's probably going to be all about stakeholder management, profile of the team, strategy, not doing what you love. And that's quite a shift for some people, and I've seen it kind of work really well, and I've seen others who've struggled with that kind of transition. And then my sort of final bit of advice, because otherwise Suzie will tell me to shut up, but set yourself up for success. And I learned this, everybody around you, marketing isn't a clearly defined skill, and everyone around you has a different interpretation of what marketing is. When you get to exec level and working with boards, they will all have very different perceptions of what marketing brings to the table. Some will believe firmly it's growth and it's at the core of the business and the customer. Some will believe that it's a secondary support method. You've got to understand what they understand as marketing to be able to present marketing in the best way for your team and for yourself. And that is probably as you start a role, but it's worth looking around you in your current role and look at the different characters, and you can start practicing techniques on some of those people to get them to understand a bit more about what marketing is.
Excellent. Caroline, amazing answers. What a treat to do this together today. Thank you ever so much. Really appreciate your time.
No problem at all. Thanks, Suzie. Good to see you.
Pleasure.